Observation. Observation is one of those skill sets that's really important, but you don't really think about, especially just life in general. From the smallest site to the largest scale, it's one of those moments where it's like you need observation to process that thinking, to allow yourself to absorb the information that you got from. So of course in architecture, it's important to know what sort of information to process through your observation. So let's take a step back a moment and what is observation? How does observation play a role in design and architecture? When I mention about observation, it's usually a form of sensing your surroundings. And what I mean by this, it's a form of senses where it goes from listening, to smelling, to seeing, to tasting, and, oh yeah, touching. But it's actually in all of those senses is the activators. The most important part about observation and those thoughts is the process to think about all those things. Noting all your experiences, your thoughts, your ponder into the memories. Like for example, if you had a food that you wanted to try, then you tasted it, you just start to say, hey, that's pretty good. Or you end up saying, wow, this tastes like sh. Another example is going to your favorite food marketplace and then your reaction of nostalgia going be like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing I've ever eaten in my life. And from watching something, you just go, oh yeah, I remember that part. That was act. Or you revisited one of your movies and then your reaction to going back that 10-year-old movie and you're like, goated. But how does all of this formulate into architecture and design? You probably noticed by now or subtly saw that my hands or my arms in a sense are not in my sleeves. That is a form of observation. But on the macro to micro scale, there's a lot of things that people may not notice, which is why we're going to memories. Using our mind like a library almost from what we encountered through those observations, something that we've gathered and thought process through, to this mental state of remembering what those senses are from what we experience. It's that unconscious part of our minds that translate into what we can remember. So in an architectural sense, really have to experience them. Observing what kind of material they do, what kind of construction it is, and really just touching the material. But the main thing is to truly capture that essence of feeling within those spaces. How do you truly build something like this? And in architecture, it's not just understanding the sense of surrounding, but also the sense of space. Going to a park, for example, of sitting down at a bench and seeing how people interact with those spaces. For example, what is the vibe of the park? What's the weather like? How many people are interacting with the park? Parks are very expansive, so you can branch out to do different type of activities. And what do they utilize for the programs that they have at the park? Programs as in different outdoor activities. Essentially being aware of your surroundings and living the moment. How are people interacting with those spaces? At a museum, for example. Usually when we go to museums, we see how people go one-on-one or face with the art and how that experience is sensed into this value and meaning to how that art reflects on them. For us, when we go to museums, or specifically me, I guess, I like to observe how the people look at the art and how the circulation works. And what I mean by circulation, I mean in which how the people are going through each of the rooms, interacting with those spaces, and how many people are in the room, and small observations like that. And to clarify, I'm not a spy. I just love the slightest details about how the light is going through and what kind of story it tells when you go through these spaces. Each users have different impressions of how the artwork represents them. However it may be, it's an important attribute as a designer to observe those reactions and see what kind of things to consider when we design things. It's truly to see how people interact with those spaces, in those spaces. Another example is a food market. And when we talk about food markets, it's usually like this place where there's different type of food, cuisines, there's cafes, desserts, and a whole bunch of collective art. But the one thing that not a lot of people talk about is, what is the atmosphere like? What is that space? Is it filled with people? Is it busy? Is there going to be different type of smell of the food and what that space activates in that memory when you observe those things? Is it from the ice cream shop that you ate that was so good? Is it the fine cuisine that you ate at that restaurant in that food market? Or is it that taco shop that you ate that's right across from that? Or is it that shrimp toast bread with a glass of wine eating in a sunny side yet cloudy environment that's just right outside of that food market? God, I miss Copenhagen. Or a popular spot. An example could be the Space Needle, a place where a lot of tourists gather around and you experience the highest point of that tower and seeing how that circulates through and that massive landscape and that cityscape of that scene with the mountains, the ocean, or is that a lake? But in any case, you experienced and saw that beautiful landscape, cityscape, and with the surrounding people in that environment, whether it be the crowded noise or the fear of height of looking down and flashing before your eyes of seeing that you're
one crack of a step could plummet you down hundreds of feet down to the ground, and
you wake up in a cold sweat. But all of those examples led from observation, from what you experienced, and then that led into the memory that you've gotten. All of those applies into the study of architecture and how much those spaces impacted our inspiration to design something greater or something as equal as that. That's why it's important to travel around as well, to heighten our senses through those observations. And the important thing is to live. Go about, experience life, because that's part of the architectural study, to observe those small things in life, or the massive aspects of life. Because our minds leave such a great impression that it leads to an inspiration to what we can do on our next projects. From the day we propose to somebody and remembering that space and how it all's planned out, to eating that fancy restaurant and seeing the fine dining of what that atmosphere and that space made an impression on you. Or even at the time when you're walking at a park and you tripped on a pebble and it was a stupid rock. From all those experiences is what made the study of how to improve the design through the context. Those are the things that allowed us to fit the standard of design and how can we make that better. So to learn how to observe is to be emotionally attached and keen on those things that allows you to have an impact and impression on yourself, whether it be the good or the bad. So don't think too much about it, as it takes time to experience those things. It's really just living through those life and being keen on your surroundings. And if you're curious enough of what that is or what you experience, you can research through that and begin that curiosity into that study. This is not just an architecture or design skill that you should have, but it's also a human skill. Otherwise, you'll trip on a pebble like I did. And probably you haven't noticed that I put a little Narlynemo at the bottom of somewhere, and congratulations, you have the ability to observe. So take a moment and pause and be more aware of your surroundings, as you may not know what the next experience may come or the inspiration that may bring to your next project.